Ooka chaka, ooka, ooka, ooka chaka, ooka, ooka, ooka chaka, ooka, ooka, ooka chaka, ooka, ooka.
I can't stop this feeling deep inside of me. Girl, you just don't realize what you do to me. When you hold me in your arms so tight, you let me know everything's alright. I'm hooked on a feeling, I'm high on believing that you're in love with me. Lips as sweet as candy, its taste is on my mind. Girl, you got me thirsty.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 99, and we're doing our top 10 films of 2014. So here it is, guys. Hope you're ready. Our top 10 of the year. Matt, give it to us. What is your number 10?
Bum, bum, bum. Okay, my number 10 involved two dudes, one dude playing two dudes, giant spiders, keys, and Canada. And it is Denis Villeneuve's Enemy. Because there has been no other movie this year that I've kind of, right when it ended, I felt like I had been raped, right in my mind.
Yes.
And yet, like, even for how much of a mind fuck that movie is, it's one that you're able to piece together afterwards. And that's so satisfying. There's something just so amazing about like being able to watch a movie and being like, I don't know what just happened. And then watching it again and being able to piece together exactly what's happening. And that's been my experience with Enemy. Again, Jake Gyllenhaal playing himself or playing a role and against himself. What's better than two Jake Gyllenhaals? So I
Three Jake Gyllenhaals.
Enemy. I think it's a hidden gem. I think it's one that you have to watch at least a couple times to really quell all of its meaty subtext from. So I loved it. So I'm giving it number 10.
Yeah, it's a great film. It was in my top 5 at the midway point, and still is going to end up in my top 30 somewhere. It's a phenomenal film.
I absolutely love it as well. Yeah, you'll probably hear it later as an honorable mention, maybe. Awesome movie. Awesome movie.
And while we love Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler for all the reasons we talked about, he's just as good here. I mean, he's amazing.
Oh yeah, you could tell the two roles apart, and that's a hard thing to do when they physically look exactly the same. But their mannerisms are very different and distinct, and that's a very hard performance type to do. He's fantastic.
Yeah, very good stuff. All right, Brendan, what do you got at number 10, man?
Oh God, this is so difficult because like my numbers like 10 through 13 are almost like interchangeable, but I my number 10 right now, and I feel pretty safe going with this. I did just see it, but this is my pick for the best biopic of the year in a very weak year for biopics. But this one was so fully realized. That is Selma. What a beautiful movie this was.
It's very good.
But this did what I love about biopics is that instead of focusing on the meandering look at someone's entire life, which I kind of don't really care so much about that, this focused on only one specific moment of his life and in history. And it's about, the march from Selma to Montgomery in protest for voting rights after the civil rights movement had been passed in 1964. The movie begins right when Martin Luther King Jr. receives the Nobel Peace Prize after that act had been passed, but it had that stipulation about like voting restrictions that they still took really heavily into account. And it's what I love so much about this movie, and this is going to sound weird, the fact that it's rated PG-13, I think actually helps it because it made it that much more brutal. There's a lot of violence that happens off screen, but it made it that much more brutal that they didn't show everything. But viscerally, it's harrowing. Yeah. And there's a scene like 5 minutes into this movie. I won't say what happens.
It's incredible.
Everyone in the theater just screamed when that happened.
I almost audibly out loud was like, holy
Yeah.
Like I thought that and almost said it out loud. It was incredible.
It's wonderful, phenomenal performance from David in the lead role here, and great acting overall. And I love how they portray like the historical figures like George Wallace with Tim Roth and Lyndon Johnson with Tom Wilkinson. In that it doesn't make them all narrow-minded villains like I expected them to. They're actually got some problems, and they're kind of trying to balance between what they know they have to do as far as their other workload, or they going with the norm with what everyone wants them to do.
Yeah.
But Martin Luther King, I love his character here because he's so flawed. He realizes he's putting his people in danger, but he actually doesn't realize that. He makes a lot of narrow-minded decisions at first, and then starts coming to terms with that. It's a beautiful movie. I was so surprised by this. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, I agree. It just missed my top 10, and maybe if I had more time to sit on it, it would make it, because I completely agree. As far as biopics go, this is easily the best of the other scene, and I loved Wild quite a bit, but this is the visceral reaction and just the flawed characters, but how much it just makes it so authentic and just represents that time period that it just, everything felt so natural and emotional, and has some of the best dialogue that I've heard all year as well. So very, very good pick. For my number 10, I'm going with a film that if you would have told me that this was going to be in my top 10 the first time I watched it, I would have slapped you in the face and told you you're crazy. Because the first time I watched this, I walked out of the theater and I hated it.
I know what you're picking. Yeah.
Interesting.
I hated it. Then I rewatched it like the next day or 2 days later, and I was like, okay, I can see why people are liking this.
Is it Cheap Thrills?
No, it's not Cheap Thrills.
He overcame in the middle of the podcast.
Come around,
No, that movie is still trash. But for this film, I had all year to kind of sit on it and think about it, and because of that, it is going to end up making my top 10, and I do find it a really beautiful film in a lot of ways, and I'm going with Under the Skin for my number 10.
Ooh. So why do you shop at night then?
People want me up.
How?
They're ignorant.
What about your friends? So you don't have any friends?
No.
What about a girlfriend? How old are you?
I'm 26.
When was the last time you had a girlfriend?
Never had one.
So don't you get lonely then?
It's a really gorgeous film. I do think it's still a bit pretentious at times. It's very ambiguous. It's certainly not for everybody, but the pretentiousness of it doesn't really bother me as much as it did the first time around. I think it's really gorgeously well handled. The camera work is really fantastic. I love the use of the Scottish landscapes we see in this, and the direction overall is really sharp. And when it comes to Scarlett Johansson in this film, not only is she great, she just freaking owns this role. And her character is very exposed in more ways than one if you've seen the film. But it's not just that she's exposed, but how that's thematically compelling and relevant to the film. And as this alien in a different world, she's trying to get an understanding of this environment that she's in, of the people around her, and just really kind of humanity in general, if you want to put it that way. But I think much more than just what makes us human, I think she's trying to get to the heart of it, like really what makes us tick. And I think where that culminates the best for me is the scene where she's in her van with the guy with the deformed face. Oh, a heartbreaking scene.
So good.
It's incredible as they're talking about love and relationships. And to Scarlett Johansson's character, like outward appearance isn't really a factor. She's trying to get to the heart of it all, what's under the skin, if you will.
Yeah.
And that to me, I thought was fantastic. And even when you look at the scenes in her apartment, which is really creepy, it's this nothingness abyss, I thought was very haunting, and I loved it. And the score, as we talked about earlier, plays a huge, huge part of that, because it's really creepy, it's eerie, harrowing, just really gives off this icky vibe that is just a huge piece of that film. So overall, I really came around on this. I think the film has a lot to say about people in general, and I think it also has a lot to say about what it means to be an alien in a foreign place.
Yeah.
And which is a scary thing. It's a very scary thing for a lot of people. So I actually really love the film. My wife still hates it, but I came around on it. Under the Skin is my number 10.
Yeah, that is a great movie. It really is, for all the reasons you said.
Yeah.
Good choice. Yes, good.
I think there's only one problem I might have with it as a minor thing, so it might just be like it's in my top 20. I'll at least say that. Maybe it'll appear in my top 10. I don't know. I'm leaving it surprising, but we'll see. But it's a fantastic movie. I do own it, and it's
And the one thing you're talking about, I do understand what you're saying with it. I guess it just doesn't bother me because I think the rest of the film is such a masterclass.
So good. Yeah.
Very good stuff. All right, Matt, what do you got at number 9?
Number 9, I talked about earlier as one of my best surprise films of the year, and I am talking about Adam Wingard's hallucinatory and unapologetically violent The Guest,
Nice.
starring Dan Stevens as a kind of like born gone wrong is kind of how I've come to define him and think of the character of The Guest. Just like the central premise is essentially like what if Bourne malfunctioned, and it's just an awesome movie. It really drags you into it right off the bat, and it's just high octane entertainment. You know, it really excels on the performance of Dan Stevens, and the soundtrack is awesome.
The soundtrack is great.
The violence over the top, but when it does happen, it's like when he tosses the grenade into a cafe at one point, and you're just like, you can't do anything but laugh. It's just so absurd, and that's what I love about this movie. It's surrealistic, and yet it's also really grounded in reality. And I think, it might not be a movie with necessarily a lot to say, but what it does have to say is that I'm a badass and hear me roar. And I loved it.
No, I agree with you. It is very much high octane entertainment, and that's very much what it is. And it doesn't necessarily have to be provocative to be fun. And that's how I found that film as well. I did have some issues with the third act, so it's not nearly as high on my list. But as far as like fun little films that came out throughout the year that not a ton of people saw, I would agree. That's one I would recommend. Great soundtrack too. I agree with you there. Very good stuff. All right, Brendan, what do you got at number 9?
Well, speaking of fun films, I mean, maybe this is kind of a fun one, but it's intellectual as well. This one grew on me. When we reviewed it, I think I gave it an A-, but it's since grown and has now become my favorite sci-fi film of the year. I'm going with Snowpiercer.
I belong on the head. You belong on the foot. Yes, so it is. In the beginning, order was prescribed by your ticket. First class, economy, and frail orders like you. Eternal order is prescribed by the sacred engine. All things flow from the sacred engine. All things in their place. All passengers in their section. All water flowing, all heat rising pays homage to the sacred engine. In its own particular, preordained position. So it is. Now, as in the beginning, I belong to the front. You belong to the tail. When the foot seeks the place of the head, a sacred line is crossed. Know your place. Keep your place. Be assured.
And a lot of, this just kept getting better and better and better the more I watched it. And it's one of those movies, the reason why I like it so much, because I kind of realized by the end, there's no good or evil really in this movie. And because at first you're kind of led one way and then something else happens and all of a sudden you're led the other way. But then you realize really both sides could either be right or wrong. And then it ends in a way that I had a problem with originally, but then I realized, no, it actually had to end that way. When things like go off the rails a bit, no pun intended, it had to. And then it leads to that great message that you love about hope.
Yeah, I love it.
I think that it's perfect. And I think, Chris Evans, I think, gives a very surprising performance here. here. I think the acting here is overall phenomenal, and a lot of great shocking sequences of action. There's an axe fight, there's a gunfight later on that comes out of nowhere that scared the living crap out of me. Juxtaposed with this kind of quirky classroom scene.
It's just great.
It's an awesome sci-fi flick,
really
and has a lot to say. In many ways, I think it could be indirectly about our modern day political system. And you've got one side versus the other, and raises almost a lot of questions about, if this were to really happen, do you need to set aside social order and fear to maintain humanity's existence? And in many ways, it doesn't answer yes or no, but the argument is still there that if as cruel as it is, you might have to. And I love that it takes ownership in that and doesn't really answer it directly. I learned to appreciate the movie a lot. I think it's going to be a great sci-fi cult film in the future. Absolutely loved it.
No, I agree. I actually just rewatched this the other day with a friend who hadn't seen it, and pretty much had the same reaction the first 2 times I saw it. In fact, if anything, I had an anger reaction at the end of it, because this should have had a much bigger release than what actually got, and actually never played in theaters around here anyway in Kentucky, which is so heartbreaking because it is a phenomenal film. It's fun to watch, has a lot to say with everything you're talking about, and overall is just a great film experience. And it didn't quite make my top 10, but it is an incredible honorable mention. It's definitely in my top 20 for sure.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Speaking of, before I get into my number 9, I'll just say my 11 through 20, I almost feel should be its own top 10 list. It was so hard fitting all of this within 10. I had about 15 films I was trying to mathematically cram into 10 slots. Sadly, math doesn't work that way.
I'll be posting mine publicly as a top 20. I just have to do it.
Yes, same here. We will have a full list of all these up on the site after the show. You can see that in the show notes. Anyway, for my number 9, I'm going with a film that we reviewed earlier in the year, Brendan, on our Extra Film podcast. And I'm going with the Polish film Ida for my number 9. This is a gorgeous black and white film that we actually talked about last week as far as its cinematography made both of our lists.
Beautiful.
As far as the look of this film, a lot of great stark imagery that really plays well into the film's themes, as we talked about last week, really sets us in that 1960s aesthetic that we experience these characters in. And along their journey, as we talked about last week, they are uncovering a lot about their family and some of its horrific past that they didn't necessarily know about before. And it's really unique because these two characters, they just met each other as they go on this journey. So there's some really interesting dynamics between the two of them that happens as they go along that I found really compelling and really beautiful all at the same time. And when we're talking about the main character here, Anna, played by Agata Czarbakowska is her name. Really at the heart of it is it's her becoming her own person alongside some of the stuff she's dealing with her aunt along this journey. Because at the beginning of this film, she's on the verge of becoming a nun.
She's about to take her vows,
Yeah, and along this journey, she's starting to second guess herself. She's not exactly sure if that's what she wants to do. And, alongside her aunt, who I think has her own issues that she's dealing with and kind of almost finding a lot more about her identity as well.
Yeah.
That I think those two characters, they just come together for a beautiful journey that I loved. So Ida would be my number 9.
Beautiful film, absolutely beautiful film. I'll leave it at that. We might hear about it more. One thing I will say, I did hear it might actually be pronounced Ida.
It might be. I'm not exactly
I have no
sure.
idea, but I'm not sure. But I'm going to.
That's just how we've called it all year.
I'm still going to call.
Scholars say that it's actually originally was called Haita. So say it as you will.
Hail Hitler!
All right, Matt. What do you got at number 8?
Number 8, I'm taking it back to a movie that we've already talked about a couple times. Actually, pretty much everything. Oh, no, there's one or two that we haven't really talked about. But another kind of big, shimmery, blockbuster-looking movie from the outside. But once you crack into it, it's full of all these rich themes of war and war mentality and which will go on to be a theme for a lot of the films that I've chosen down the line. But this one had tanks, it had battles, and it had apes. I'm talking, of course, of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Nice.
Take you out So yeah, I just was toppled by this film. There are so many harrowing moments in what is essentially a PG-13 movies about talking apes who take over the world. And yet, like, God, the themes just are really deep. And I know a lot of people there's been a bit of a backlash against this film where people have said, oh, really, there wasn't all that much to it. But I would fervently disagree. I think there
agree.
is
a lot.
So much. There's so
movie.
much going on. Yeah.
And
internally.
And then there's like, with all this stuff going on, even if you strip that stuff back, there's still apes riding horseback, firing off double machine guns. Like, come on.
Holding spears.
What's not to like?
And
just
wow.
So good. So good. The performances, especially on the ape side,
incredible.
phenomenal.
Incredible.
And that one big bombastic war scene with the tank and the horses.
Yeah.
And my God, that was one of the most affecting scenes of the entire year.
That was so.
It just blew me away and totally took me by surprise. I gave this an A+ when it came out because it floored me, and I can't wait.
Yeah.
I just bought the Blu-ray, and I can't wait to watch it again.
I
seek out these extra scenes that you were talking about.
I did get to rewatch it last week sometime, and it holds up on every level. And as great as those big bombastic action scenes are, you juxtapose that with the scene of Caesar and his son in the house. Just as potent and incredibly emotional that, I still lose it every time I watch it. It's great.
And a lot of people complain that the human characters weren't quite as fleshed out as it could have been, but this really was about the apes. And you've got, you can name 5 of the apes characters that are amazing characters, which is just the same as any other movie. It's just the only difference is that they're not human. I will argue that Jason Clarke as Malcolm, I thought was a phenomenal human character. He was great. I love the relationship that he and Caesar have. I will spoil this. This movie was my number 11. It just missed it, and I'm just deeply distraught. I couldn't include it in my top 10.
It was very close for me.
So good.
I'm distraught that you didn't too.
I know.
I tried. I tried to force it in as much as I could.
But that tank scene
hard.
when Koba climbs that tank, it's all one take too. Or at least makes it look like it. It's harrowing, and I love it, but it builds dramatically. It's why it works. That's why I like Matt Reeves. He builds action but makes it dramatically thrilling, and it's so good.
Easily one of the best blockbusters of the year.
Oh, hands down.
Oh yeah,
hands down.
All right, Brendan, what do you got at number 8?
Number 8, I'm going with one of, if not the best movie to tackle religious topics this year. I'm going with Calvary, starring Brendan Gleeson.
Yep.
And a round of so many other people. I love the dark, biting humor in here, juxtaposed with the harrowing and really deeply depressing subject matter. I love that this is really an open-minded view about our current view of religion and all these different people that this good-hearted priest, one of the best characters of the year, I think,
absolutely,
tries to go through to help all these people, and the negative and sometimes positive feedback. It shows all these different viewpoints that these people have about religion and the priesthood in this time and age after all these accusations about the priesthood, especially in the Catholic Church that's been going on, that it creates this negative viewpoint towards them, even when this one in particular may have not done anything wrong. So when he gets, in the beginning of the movie, he gets this huge warning that someone's going to kill him in a week, kill a good-hearted priest on a Sunday. So it's kind of like a who done it. Well, not really, kind of like a who's gonna do it. Even though the priest knows who it is, we don't. Which I think is awesome. I love that mystery behind it. But all the different viewpoints that he meets really creates this interesting world, and some of it is very funny, and some of it's very sad and really depressing and hard to watch. But then some of it's very happy and moving to see that there are still some people that do have faith in this guy, and I love all those different juxtapositions, and it creates what I think is a very beautifully open-minded view about the nature of religion and the priesthood this day and age. I absolutely love this movie, and on top of that, great score, beautifully shot, great writing, all the above.
No, I absolutely agree. It's one of the most complex, thematically rich films I've seen that has such an intriguing hook all at the same time.
Oh yeah,
phenomenal. Great stuff. For my number 8, I am going with a film that I guess is a little bit polarizing depending on the director. I think if people like the director, they tend to love this film, and it's making a lot of top 10 lists. And if you don't like them, then you're wrong. So my number 8 is Wes Anderson's The Grand Budapest Hotel. I absolutely love this film. It's absolutely beautiful and gorgeous to look at. It has all that amazing Wes Anderson-y set designs and color palettes that you would expect from him. I love his creative camera work, a lot of stationary camera work once again in this film. And I really love the framing and the setup of this film too. It kind of starts in modern day with the girl that has the book, The Grand Budapest Hotel. Then we go back to 85 with the author, and then back to 68 with the author getting his inspiration. And then we go back to 1932 where most of the story takes place. And each time the aspect ratio changes to kind of reflect the time period, which I thought was a really interesting and unique style choice for the film. But all that being said, Ralph Fiennes carries this movie. He's hilarious. He's bizarre. He's zany, very magnetic, and just really captivated me the entire time. And for a guy that doesn't do roles like this very often, he's obviously known for doing more kind of villain kind of work. His comedic timing was incredible in this film. I thought he was great, and I thought he had a fantastic chemistry with Tony Revolori, the lobby boy that kind of goes along this journey with him. And I love seeing the effect that they have on one another, and ultimately how that culminates in a great transformation for the Gustave character, which I thought was amazing. So, and it has some of my favorite scenes of the entire year. Like, I love the chase on the mountain. I love the stop motion, going back to live action aspects that Wes Anderson was doing there. And overall, I just found this a really hilarious film that has some nice dark touches to it that we don't see from Wes Anderson a lot, that I thought was really fantastic. And it really talks a lot about nostalgia and kind of the death of nostalgia in a lot of ways that we talked about on our main review for that. But, and Alexander Desplat's score, the last thing I'll say about it, is one of my favorites, as I mentioned earlier, from a Wes Anderson film. So overall, this came together for just a superb experience. I love Wes Anderson. I love just about everything he does. So The Grand Budapest Hotel is my number 8. All right, Matt, give it to us. What is your number 7?
Okay, continuing upon my theme of bombastic, nutty, big, kind of underrated spectacle films, I am going with a film that could easily be called the best martial arts movie that's ever been made.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't even have to say it. Kind of building on the likes of Internal Affairs or The Departed before it. The Raid 2 is a movie that kind of takes the insanely perfect choreography of the first film and somehow blows it up into just an insane degree. The hand-to-hand combat in this movie makes anyone holding a gun look like a it has some of the best action scenes, not only of the year, but quite honestly of all time. And the stunt choreography is unfreaking believable. Every time I watch it, I'm thinking to myself, like, how did they do this? And if you watch like a breakdown of some of the scenes, like, Gareth Evans is just such a phenomenally clever filmmaker. Like in the car chase scene, the way that they get some of those camera angles, rather than, cheaping out and using CGI and just taking shortcuts, they have a guy disguised as a seat cushion in a car who, like, they hand him the camera, and like it's these clever little ways that they like subvert our expectations and like get these shots that most films don't, that makes it just so visually arresting. And good Lord, the action in this movie is just top notch.
It's amazing. Yeah.
It's like, God, it's like somebody beating you to death in the best way possible.
I know that kitchen fight scene, I would argue, is the best fight scene of all time. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So entertaining.
It's amazing.
So entertaining.
So,
such a great film.
I absolutely adore this movie. I know it's going to be one that I watch over and over and over again. So The Raid 2 gets number 7 spot.
Good pick.
Yeah,
You're getting a lot of
stuff.
picks, actually.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that are really
a lot of people love it. Yeah. All right, what do you got at number 7, Brendan?
All right, my number 7 pick is awesome. In fact, everything about it is awesome. Which should tell you what it is right now, because remember, I had 3 animated movies and in my best animated film pick, and I didn't say which one was going to win, but in my top 10 at number 7 is the Lego Movie. What a witty and wild ride this was, full of incredibly goofy and fun humor. And then it's huge heart at the end of it. And I was blown away by how beautiful and funny and all the above it was. It's one of the greatest film experiences I've had in recent years. And it was such a wild ride. And it was really about something. And I love how it did such a great job exploring the idea of, inspiration, especially in the mindset of a child, and how it's like a child that was kind of feeling he was being robbed of that, and how someone who will remain nameless finally gives in and acknowledges that, individual childlike inspiration and great ideas like that only really help in their growing up process in many ways. And it's indirectly a great coming of age tale that's kind of intertwined within this movie. Yeah. Which I was so unexpected to see. And it just goes and it just takes a huge turn that really solidified that this is an animated film that I think will stand the test of time, and I absolutely cannot wait for the sequel. I'm so excited to see what they do for it. It's a phenomenal film. Shocking and huge surprise as well.
Yeah, no, that third act for me is just some of the best filmmaking I've seen all year, and still makes me emotional every time I watch it.
Absolutely.
It's great. So yeah, it has every emotional spectrum that you could want in a movie in one experience.
Yes,
it's fantastic.
Completely agree.
Didn't quite make my top 10, easily in my top 20 though.
At least that's good. Yeah.
Very good stuff. My number 7 is a film that has gotten a lot of criticism, and I don't care. Like, it's one that I still really love. Mm-hmm. One of my best experiences I've had in a theater all year. In fact, it was my most anticipated film going into the fall and winter season, and it lived up on every level for me anyway. My number 7 is Paul Thomas Anderson's Inherent Vice. I love this film. I was grinning ear to ear the entire time. Maybe the funniest film I've seen all year for me personally anyway. It's beautifully shot, exquisite, gorgeous lighting, very purposeful camera work that really enhances the scene and the comedy, and the editing plays a big part of that as well. And it's everything that you would expect from Paul Thomas Anderson on a technical level. A lot of people have been talking about the plot and how confusing it is. I think that's a lot of
it's not about that.
It's not about the plot. If you go in wanting mystery and plot in this investigation, you're going in for the wrong movie. It has nothing to do with that. It's on the surface, it's supposed to work as a drug-fueled, incoherent, disillusioned trip that these characters experience. But I do think beneath the surface, if you will, there is a lot more than that. I think ultimately we find these characters in the search for something, much like we've seen in a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson's films, especially from the male perspective. We see these characters looking for something. So as much as Doc in this movie is doing this investigation and trying to find this guy and the mystery behind him, he's actually searching for something else. He's searching for a someone and this love that he has. And I feel like that's translated into the supporting characters as well. Owen Wilson's character especially, and even Josh Brolin's character at the same time. I mean, ultimately the drugs, I think, just represent them hiding from the chaos around them. And I'm actually going into this more than I'd like to, because we're going to talk about this on our extra film this week.
Sure, yeah.
But there's a lot more behind the mystery. Again, if you go in looking for an investigation film, you're just looking at it the wrong way, I think.
It's not about that, yeah.
And I've heard some complaints about, just it being too confusing and kind of paralleling this kind of drug-fueled rage that doesn't make a good film. And my counter argument to that is what you said, Brennan. It's just not about that. Like, I think that is very surface level. Like, that's kind of like if I was going to do a trailer, be like, hey, come do this trippy experience kind of thing. Like, that's the marketing of the film. Yeah. But really, it's about rich, layered characters that are in search for something more meaningful than drugs. Yeah. I think drugs are just kind of their escape, if you will, in this. But the way that it's put together, it's confusing, and it's and it has all those drug aspects to it. But I just find this really funny. It's hilarious. I laughed throughout 98% of this, and has some of the best scenes I've seen all year. You kind of alluded to one of them earlier on the show, Brendan, with Brolin's character kind of busting down the door, if you will. But that was awesome. But there were so many different scenes between the two of them that I just was laughing incredibly out loud for. So for me, Paul Thomas Anderson can do no wrong. I loved Inherent Vice, so it makes my number 7 slot.
And he's still my favorite filmmaker, and that was also my number 1 anticipated film of the year. And it may sound pretentious to say, but I think the film is really, it's supposed to be confusing. I think it really is. And regardless, though, and I will say this now, it's not in my top 10. And in fact, after sitting on it, I would say, as much as I really do enjoy the film, it is a minor disappointment for me, only because as much as I agree the movie is not supposed to be about the mystery and that it is meant to be confusing, it still doesn't change the fact that there was a lot of points of the movie that was just very uncomfortable and frustrating for me to watch. There are a few moments that did take me out of the movie, unfortunately, but overall, it is in my top 20. I'll say it is in my top 20, but it just missed it out by a few margins of other great films.
And like I said, we'll talk more about that on our extra film this week. We'll talk about this and Selma, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. All right, Matt, what is your number 6?
Okay, this is actually a film that I kind of thought would be higher up on my list earlier in the year. In fact, I thought for a while that it would be my number 1, but kind of my reaction to it is somewhat mellowed throughout the year. I've seen it twice now, and it didn't quite have as much of an impact the second time I saw it, but nothing will quell that first experience that I had with Richard Linklater's Boyhood. I found the film, I found it deeply moving, particularly the first time I watched it, and take into account that I saw this without any marketing for it, so I couldn't forecast any of the physical transformation of the character from a young boy to the man that he becomes, and I think that is kind of quintessential to the experience. Like once you know where it goes, it's kind of not the same the second time around, but kind of seeing that and experiencing it for the first time is something unlike what other films have done before. And I think Richard Linklater is kind of the only guy who would have the foresight to pull something off like this. And I think he really does do it beautifully. It's a gorgeous film. It's somewhat life affirming. But I don't think that it really seeks out to be. It's more about the quiet moments in life,
exactly.
It doesn't celebrate the graduation, it's after the graduation. It's not on the birthday. It's the day after the birthday. It's not about like these pinnacle moments so much as just like kind of just how much of a chore like it is kind of just like getting through these formative years and how you don't really appreciate like the moment when you're in it a lot of the time, and then like looking back on it you're like, oh shit, like did 13 years just go by? So I thought this was great. I can definitely see an argument for it being higher up on other people's lists, but since I saw this all the way back in January, it hasn't quite stuck with me just as much as I had thought it might. But still, I think it definitely deserves a spot in the top 10, and so it's sitting pretty at number 6.
Yeah, it's still a really good film. I have some issues that we've talked about before, Brennan, with some of the writing of the film near the third act that kind of took me out of the film a little bit, but I still think overall, going back to the stuff I was saying about Linklater as a director, I feel like overall this is a rich experience that I'll never forget. I mean, it still put me in that spot of remembering my childhood, and you're right, it talks a lot about the mundaneness of life, and that's what makes the film extraordinary. Is that it is about these everyday things that happen, whether it's a pinnacle moment like a graduation or whether it's just meeting a girl and having a conversation.
It makes you part of the story.
Absolutely.
So it's like you're watching a home video of your own life in many ways. It's so relatable. That's why it works.
Yeah, really good stuff. All right, what do you got, Brendan, at number 6?
Number 6, I'll be quick about this because, JD, I think you had it at number 9, but I'm going with Ida. My favorite, technically, I guess my favorite foreign language film of the year. But what a beautiful film, like beautiful black and white stock cinematography, and a beautiful, in many ways, I guess you can argue this is a coming of age tale. As you mentioned, about a woman who is going through, her nunhood, I guess you can say, about to take her vows, but then realizes that her past family history is that of Jewish descent. In a time when this mindset and this way of life was still kind of frowned upon in this post World War II time. Sure. And I love when she learns about this history. She's kind of torn between both sides of the spectrum and has to ultimately make a choice of what kind of life she wants to live. And she does go back and forth, and that also inherently affects her aunt's lifestyle, her Aunt Wanda, who the movie becomes just as much about her as it does about the central character of Ida or Anna. And I absolutely love that, how they both kind of balance out with each other and create like two simultaneous stories that are all together to be about both of them at the exact same time. It's absolutely beautiful, absolutely riveting, beautiful to look at. I mentioned in our one top three, you can pause any form of this movie and hang it on the wall as a photograph. Yeah. It's wonderful. But yeah, this is my number 6 pick, probably my pick for best foreign language film of the year, technically. I absolutely love it.
No, I agree with you for all the reasons I talked about earlier. Yeah, fantastic stuff.
Simple as that.
All right, for my number 6, I'm going to my favorite animated film of the year. So I was kind of teasing like you did. I didn't quite have the Lego Movie in my top 10, as I mentioned, but my number 6 is How to Train Your Dragon 2, which is my favorite animated film of the year. As much as I love The Wind Rises, I love Princess Kaguya, How to Train Your Dragon 2, it just goes to a place emotionally for me that it's hard to describe, really. I think that this is arguably the best animated sequel of all time. Sorry, Toy Story 2 and 3. I mean, those are great films for a lot of reasons, but How to Train Your Dragon 2, I think, sits there comfortably for me. Anyway.
You totally stole my words, because that's what I said in our initial review. When we reviewed this for the first time, I said this is the best animated sequel of all time.
And it still holds up there for me. And, going back to that review, Brennan, you were talking about how this advances the story. And I think it does that in an incredible way. And it's visually stunning all at the same time. And this movie, it goes to places we just don't see in animated films a lot. At least American animated films, we don't see it go to this territory a ton.
Right.
And what this film says about family, to me, was just flawless. And also on the extra film review, Brendan, we were talking about how people had criticized the second act for being slow, not having as much action. And that to me does not matter, because it slows down for the sake of drama and amazing character building that for me was so emotional, again, focused heavily on family, that resonated so high for me that I was okay with the subdued action. I mean, I loved what was happening there from a character standpoint. And where we go with Toothless and Hiccup in the third act, they have this maturity. They're kind of forced to kind of stand up for themselves because of some events that happen. Like I was saying, it goes to some really rough territory for an animated film. And those repercussions, I thought, led to some really fantastic sequences near the end that, again, emotionally resonated incredibly high for me. So this only builds on what was already an amazing animated film anyway with the first How to Train Your Dragon. This is even better. And the visuals are stunning.
Yeah.
Some of the best I've seen all year. I mean, one of my favorite shots, again, if I was going to just do a screenshot and have a painting on my wall, the scene where Hiccup is riding Toothless and they're just above the clouds and he's just kind of leaning back on him.
Yeah.
Amazing. You can sense the harmony between the two of them, and from where it goes from there is amazing anyway. But that, from a visual standpoint, is incredible.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
Beautiful movie. Beautiful.
Good choice. Good choice.
Yeah, so I love it. How to Train Your Dragon 2 is my number 6. And it was kind of funny because I was sitting there thinking, like, is How to Train Your Dragon 2 really going to be in my top 10? As much as there's all these other great art films and big blockbusters that have been great. And I was like, you know what? Let me go back and rewatch this. And I was like, I'm even going to listen to Brennan and I's review on it. And I didn't have to go very far to go, yep, this is making my top 10. This is sitting at numbers. This is sitting pretty high for me. I love it. It's just one of my favorite films of the year. I know everyone's going to pick the Lego Movie as their favorite. Lego Movie's probably going to win at the Oscars for Best Animated Film.
Sure.
But I don't care. How to Train Your Dragon 2 was just a more rich movie to me overall.
And as I mentioned, it makes the first movie even better, knowing it goes to this route of the story.
Absolutely. All right. Well, before we get into our top 5, got another voicemail I want to play real fast. Former co-host of the InSession Film Podcast, Scott Pollard. What was your number 1 movie of 2014?
Hey, JD. This is Scott. I just wanted to call in and let you know my number 1 movie was Under the Skin. I really loved Scarlett Johansson in this movie, and I really loved the plot and how it explored a lot of different themes like femininity and just what it's like to be a foreigner or an alien. I also like the score a whole lot. It's probably my favorite one of the year. It reminded me a lot of The Shining. And that's about it. So that's my number 1 of 2014. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys soon and looking forward to hearing your guys' picks. See you later.
All right, thanks for that pick, Scott, for Under the Skin. As I mentioned, was my number 10 movie of 2014. All right, guys, here it is, our top 5 movies of 2014.
The nitty-gritty.
I know. All right, Matt, give it to us, man. What is your number 5?
Okay, this is one that I was hinting at earlier and teasing for you. I was trying to lead you to believe that I was going to say this movie when I was talking about tanks, and it's coming up now. David Ayer's Fury is my number 5.
Good shot. Oh, that wasn't me. No, I'm the instrument, not the hand. God didn't call us today. You hear me, boys?
What's he doing up there? Big paradise? Everyone else came up, snake eyes but us.
Lord's protection.
We got it, don't we, boy?
Yes, sir.
We got it.
sir.
Norm mowed them down, didn't he, too?
Hey, good job, Norm.
Welcome to the Army, Norm.
You did good.
Best job I ever had.
Best job ever.
Best job I ever had.
This movie has caught quite a bit of backlash. At the beginning of the year, it was kind of considered to be amongst those that might be considered for an Academy Award. That obviously is not the case. And, I'm willing to admit it's a bit of a mess. But then again, I think a lot of the greatest movies are a little bit of a mess. If you think back to a lot of Tarantino movies, they're really sloppy. Django Unchained is a phenomenal movie. It's my favorite movie of the last 5 years, or one of my favorite movies of the last 5 years, and one of my favorites of the decade. And yet, there are some scenes in that where you're like, come on, Tarantino, what are you thinking? And that's a little bit the same case with Fury. And yet it's just the whole is so much larger than the sum of its parts. And I just think it works so well. It features the best ensemble cast of the year for my money.
I agree.
Some of the most absolutely gut-wrenching scenes of war and violence. And my God, this is a film that's just willing to go the distance and get really, really down in the muck. And for it, I think it's a beautiful film about camaraderie and war as not hell so much as work. And that's a really interesting concept, we've seen war is hell before. We've seen it so many times. And, war is a drug, an idea introduced in Catherine Bigelow's seminal Oscar winner, the Hurt Locker, but this idea of just war as work and it as a job, is really arresting and really, really interesting. And you add to that, the scenes with the tiger tank and the dinner scene is, seems to be a motif through this episode. Dinner scenes.
We've always said that.
All year long, man.
I just feel like it really adds up to something really special. And I thought it was a big, beautiful, bent out of shape ball of fire that I just really, really, really enjoyed. Fury is my number 5.
Man, I couldn't agree with that pick more. Like I was saying earlier when you were talking about with Shia, and even just the ensemble cast of this is just incredible. So I completely agree. Fury's an incredible film. It's not making a ton of top 10 lists, but I still find it one of the best movies of the year. I mean, it's incredible. So, all right, what do you got at number 5, Brendan?
All right, my number 5, this is what I said during our review of this film, and I still stand by this statement. This is the taxi driver of our generation. Number 5 is Dan Gilroy's Nightcrawler.
My company is Video Production News, a professional news gathering service. That's how it should be read, and that's how it should be said. I also want to go to the next rung and meet your team, and the station manager, and the director, and the anchors, and start developing my own personal relationships. I'd like to start meeting them this morning. You'll take me around, you'll introduce me as the owner and president of Video Production News, and remind them of some of my many other stories. I'm not done. I also want to stop our discussion over prices. This will save time. So when I say that a particular number is my lowest price, that's my lowest price. And you can be assured that I arrived at whatever that number is very carefully. Now, when I say that I want these things, I mean that I want them. And and I don't want to have to ask again.
And you can almost say like this year's Drive if you want to compare it to something more recent, but I think Taxi Driver, the way it uses the setting as a character in this film, Taxi Driver was about New York, this about LA, about, crime and trying to capture that crime in a state of mind like that. But Jake Gyllenhaal's performance here just sells this idea about obsession, and then he not only that, we talked about him so many times, but there's a lot of stuff that's indirectly, really directly about the nature of the job market these days and the economy. So you got a lot of dual themes going on here. It makes for one of the most riveting and thrilling movies I've seen in recent years. It's scarier than many horror films I've seen. The last whole half of the film is building up and just keeps building and building and building. And I'm here like grabbing like the arm of my seat, practically shaking. My palms are sweating. And then it leads to this huge climax that is so literally explosive. And it leads to some shocking revelations. No, not really revelations, but some things happen that did take me by surprise, not only just plot-wise, but also emotionally. I'm not going to say it just for the sake of spoilers. And then the actual ending of this movie, to see what kind of despicable man that this guy became, it's just so
crazy,
riveting. And Jake Gyllenhaal sells it 110% believable. And oh, wow, what a movie. I cannot wait to watch this again and again and again. It's so thrilling. Can't recommend it enough.
This was one of those movies I was referring to when I said I was trying to cram 15 movies into 10 slots.
Yeah.
Like this just missed the list. I think it's sitting at like 12 or 13 for me. But
well, you're wrong. So
it's incredible. It's such a great film for all the reasons you said. It's really good.
So good.
All right, for my number 5, I'm going to a film that you already mentioned, Brendan. So I guess I won't go into this a ton, but I will add on to it. My number 5 is Calvary. This was one of the most emotional experiences I had in 2014. I loved Brendan Gleeson. It is a performance that I think is flying under the radar a little bit when people are talking about Best Actor. But
I agree.
Man, I thought he was amazing. And I love what you were talking about, Brennan, with the opening of the film. It does create this amazing hook that is really intriguing, but ultimately it goes into more character struggles that is just super compelling.
Absolutely.
On top of this whodunit kind of mystery thing. And I love how in that opening scene, not only is there the hook, but it sets up this idea that Father James in this movie is almost like Christ in a lot of ways, like the parallels
taking
to Jesus.
Taking the pains for all their sins.
Is just incredible. And just the kind of questions this film has about faith and doubt, and just the way that suspicion of the church is played into that. I mean, there's a really great scene of Father James with this little girl that culminates with this guy kind of questioning what he's doing.
Yeah.
And it's an innocent conversation.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing, sad going on, but the film does kind of raise this question that the church is very suspicious. There's a lot of bad people and power within the church, and Father James isn't one of them, but because he's in that position, there's this status that people have when they think about that. And so I thought that exploration was really fascinating. And you were talking about some really potent scenes with his daughter that is in the film. Kelly Riley is amazing.
That third act revelation scene.
Incredible.
Gets me every time.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I love how it's played into Father James's struggle as he's trying to come to grasp with some things of his past that weren't so great, and that scene is just one of those that he's trying to build, because he knows the ending to his story.
Yeah,
like he knows where this is going, and so as the film kind of goes on, he's kind of coming to an end with some of those chapters, and it was just amazing to watch. I mean, I thought it was fantastic. So incredibly layered film,
and makes forgiveness such a great theme in that movie as well. Ironically, that's one of the tracks on the soundtrack as well. Yeah,
absolutely. So absolutely love it. Calvary would be my number 5. All right, Matt, what do you got at number 4?
I am going back to a film that was just talked about. JD, you're a fool for leaving this off your list, because Nightcrawler is the not only does it have the most interesting characters of the year in Lou Bloom, which is just the most innocuous name for a character as villainous as he is. Which I love. You know, he sounds like a Wall Street douchebag right from the get-go, even though he's like this kind of back alley creepster. But I love the themes of the film. I love the movement of the film. As Brendan was talking about earlier, that's the whole third act is just it's horrifying. It really is. Like from the moment that he steps into that house, and I don't want to spoil anything, but the moment that he steps into the house, and that's all I really need to say. If you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. From that point on, it's just you're on the edge of your seat, and you're so engaged, and you're so in this world. So I absolutely love this film. I had one or two tiny issues with it, but other than that, I think it's one of the most flawless films of the year, and has the best performance of the year for my money. So number 4, Nightcrawler.
See, you guys are giving me a lot of crap for this not being on my top 10 list, but I mean, the thing is, the separation between 10 and where Nightcrawler is on my list is like centimeters. I mean,
for sure,
I would like my 11 through 20 to be on my top 10 because I love all those movies as well. There's not much separation. You know, Brennan, I think you brought this up on the last show or a few shows ago, how it's been so consistent all the way throughout the year.
Oh, yeah.
That's what's made this year so special is we've just had phenomenal year from February with the Lego movie to even this past weekend with Selma and Inherent Vice. That 2014 was just superb. So, I mean, Nightcrawler is I agree with you guys. It's amazing for all the reasons you guys are saying.
I like how you're defending yourself when we're just busting your balls.
Yeah. I mean, it is a great film, though. It is. So, all right, what do you got at number 4, Brendan?
Number 4. So, JD, this might be a bit of a surprise for you because for some reason, I think you think this is going to be my number 1 after some of the conversations that we had. But going back to the animated category, my number 4 is How to Train Your Dragon 2. This was higher on my list before, but things got shifted around a little bit. But for all the reasons that you already talked about, what a beautiful animated film this is.
Amazing.
And I think the only thing I'll add on from what you didn't say is that in many ways there's a lot of comparisons I can make to this to something like The Lion King and how it addresses like coming of age and things like that. Because in the first movie, Hiccup was just a young little boy. He kind of befriends a dragon. It's kind of like an E.T. kind of story in many ways.
Sure.
Here, I mean, he has to grow up and become a leader and a man, and but the way it advances that story is just impeccable and it's beautiful. The only minor complaint I will have, it's not a complaint yet until I see what they do with the third movie, and it's really the utilization of the villain in this movie. And I won't spoil what happens, but there's a little bit left up in the air, I guess, in the end of the movie, so it kind of creates a bit of a question as to what might be the end result of this villain. So there's a possibility that maybe we'll see something of his story resurface. So I hope it does because I think they introduced him really well. And
a lot of the rumor was that. I mean, that's what they were saying is, he was supposed to have more. They decided to focus on other things, and they're going to build to that in the third. Supposedly, anyway.
But there's some beautiful parental relationships in this movie. There's a great character reveal that happens.
Yeah, there really are.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
It's amazing.
Absolutely love this movie. I could watch it over and over again. I won't get sick of it.
Yeah, I agree. It's incredible. I absolutely love it. And I actually wasn't necessarily thinking this was going to be your number 1. I figured it would be top 5, though.
Okay. But that's a given. I knew that was going to be on the report.
It's good stuff. For my number 4, I'm going to a film that Matt already talked about. So I try not to give away too much, but I love this film as well.
Good choice.
My number 4 is Fury, the David Ayer film. And man, this film, there's not a whole lot of films in 2014 that moved me as much as this one, which is crazy because it's a war film and it's very brutal. It's very violent and visceral and raw for all the reasons Matt was talking about. And it kind of can have this kind of wars cliche kind of feel to it. I mean, we do kind of touch on the lostness of these guys' humanity and their identity, but I think in the end, it's a lot more than that. And when we are introduced to the Logan Lerman character, I think he ends up bringing this redemptive factor that we don't see a lot in war films. And at first, he's kind of this threat, and the group kind of tries to ruin his innocence. But in the end, it's really about him bringing a sense of normalcy that I think was pretty pivotal. And I think we really see that. And again, the dinner scene in the second act of this film, which was absolutely incredible. And even further with this idea, it really culminates with some really great scenes within the tank for me. I think I mentioned this in our favorite scenes, top 3 that we discussed a few shows ago.
You did.
Because I think this was my number 4. I couldn't really pick one, but any scene with these guys in the tank was absolutely moving for me. Absolutely loved it. And one of my favorite scenes of the year was when they were inside. This was, I think, right before the big final fight. And Shia LaBeouf's character is talking about Isaiah 6:8 from the Bible. His nickname in the movie is Bible, which is kind of funny on its own. But yeah, but he's talking about Isaiah 6:8. And I think, especially if you know that verse, it's a verse that resonates loud for me anyway. And this becomes one of the most emotional moments I've had all year. I mean, the symbolism there is crazy, especially when you relate that to duty and sacrifice and the literal crossroads that these characters were in, and the brotherhood and the camaraderie that they're fighting together in. Relating back to Isaiah 6:8 was just incredible for me. I absolutely loved it. The direction by David Ayer is immaculate, very meticulous in his direction. I loved his color palette here and how that blends with the themes, and his attention to detail was fantastic. And as you were talking about, Matt, the battle scenes with the tanks is so intense, and Shia LaBeouf is so good. Intense. He's so good.
So intense.
He's just incredible. The acting, like you said, the ensemble here is phenomenal. So I was very, very moved by this, despite whatever issues people have with it. For me, and I feel like, Matt, maybe you can add to this, but a lot of the criticisms I think have mostly come from the ending. Like, a lot of people didn't love how that was handled, but I don't know. For me, it wasn't so much about the literal fight as it was more the internal fight and the brotherhood there. For me, that was the thing that made me so emotional. So, especially the setup to that fight for me personally, anyway. So.
Yeah, I think you're definitely onto something with that, and I think that is why it resonated with me as strongly as it did as well. It definitely has like these moments of really transcendent camaraderie and brotherhood, and I think I don't think I can say it better than you did. I think you actually got the proverbial nail on the head on that one.
That's good stuff. And it was kind of interesting. I wasn't sure if you were going to have this. I do remember you liking it, but I haven't seen this film on anyone else's top 10 list. I don't think I've literally seen one. So I thought I was going to be the only one. So when I heard you have it on your list at number 5 or 6 or whatever you had it, it was pretty unique that we're going to have 2 on the show. So, all right.
Hell yeah.
All right, Matt, what do you have at number 3?
Okay, I'm gonna throw down the gauntlet on this one. I'm sure that this is probably gonna be number 1 or number 2 on your all's list, so I'm getting it out of the way right now. I'm talking about a movie that I don't really think needs any introduction because we've already talked about it so much. I'm talking about Whiplash.
Why do you suppose I just hurled a chair at your head, Neiman?
I don't know.
Sure you do.
The tempo?
Were you rushing or were you dragging?
I don't know.
Start counting.
5, 6, 7.
In 4, damn it! Look at me!
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Now, was I rushing or was I dragging?
I don't know.
Count again.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Rushing or dragging?
Rushing.
So you do know the difference!
From the first scene in the movie where Fletcher wanders in and finds this kid sitting there at the drum set, to the very last scene where he's wailing away at a drum solo, this movie is just captivating. It's got an energy that's all its own. It's just full of life. The script is perfect. It was on the blacklist forever. And there's just, if as Fletcher goes on and talks about the importance of time, the importance of tempo, right? Not my tempo, not my tempo. This is a movie that's always on the right tempo. and it's just hitting beat after beat after beat. It's impeccably paced. It's so perfectly precise. I absolutely loved it. Whiplash, my number 3.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's great.
Oh, it's so good. In fact, like if I remember correctly, when we reviewed this movie on our extra film, it was the 3 of us on that. It
was.
Yeah,
it was
we had
us,
that was a great discussion.
Yeah,
I think that was.
You're right.
That was.
And
one
we all were raving.
Yeah, but we had a great discussion about the questions that it raises about, in many ways, like being like the anti-Dead Poet Society, but it's not trying to promote one way or the other. I think is great. Is that it creates another argument for how to get to that greatness status, which I thought was
without necessarily leaning one way or another. Exactly. It just raises those questions.
But the point is that it still worked for this person. So it makes you think, could I do this or could I put myself through that or not? And I love that. We may talk about it a little bit more. For me, not quite yet. But my number 3, I'm going with what I think is still, from a technical standpoint, the best directed film of the year, and that is...
That's good.
Had to do it. Of course, I'm talking about Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. What an amazing movie that this is. What a technical achievement that this is. One of the best acting of the year from everybody. A beautiful ensemble cast, and really has a lot great things to say about the nature of art and entertainment, especially from the play standpoint. It has things that I say about superhero movies. About just actors who want to be respected after certain reputations. And there's even a great scene between Regan, played by Michael Keaton, and this film critic. And it is kind of over the top. I mean, but it is supposed to be. But that narrow-mindedness does exist, and I love that kind of juxtaposition between that narrow-mindedness of viewpoints of this kind of art and how some people would not be willing to accept it because of what they think that they perceive this kind of person as. And it is a great thing to say about, kind of like, in many ways, about blockbuster entertainment, and how some people kind of view that as a bit, I guess you can say, that they kind of frown upon, and that it's kind of a one-dimensional form of an art, but in many ways it could be taken a bit more the other way. And I love that it has a lot. This movie's about everything. It really is. It's about so much, but it all feels so seamless at the same time. And I love there's sequences that are so funny in this movie. There are some that are incredibly dramatic. There's that one scene with Emma Stone and her father, and it's one of the clip. I think we used it to set up the clip when we reviewed it, where she does like, "You don't matter, get used to it." And but her facial expression right after she says that,
guilt immediately.
Oh God! And she sells it so well with her eyes. I mean, what a great movie! What a fantastic movie! And if this doesn't win best cinematography, this will show what kind of freaking politics or just because Emmanuel Lubezki won for Gravity last year. If that's the case, then the Oscars are meaningless.
It's meaningless. Yeah. No, I'll agree with you, and I guess I'll just jump off of that because Birdman is also my number 3, and man, I couldn't agree with you guys more about the cinematography, and it obviously is going to be the first thing you notice, but I think it's not even just how amazing that it looks and how seamless it is, but I just love how it adds to the chaos and the hysteria that these characters are experiencing. I mean, the first time we watched this, Brennan, and you and I went to Cincy to see this. The first 15 minutes to me were so disorienting. Like, I had to really adjust to the camera work and what was going on, especially because it never stops moving in the first half of this movie.
Well, unlike you, I didn't know that going in. Thank God, though, I didn't know this was all made to look like it was one take, unlike most people who went to see it. And I was like 15 minutes in, I was like, wait a minute.
Like, what?
This is not cutting. This is still going.
Crazy. So you really do have to adjust to it, but it does add to that hysteria, which I thought was awesome. And just like you were talking about, Brendan, I love the questions it raises on art and superhero films. And do superhero films, do they qualify as art? And nobody 20 years ago would have said yes to that. But now in today's age, it's a lot more respected. I mean, hell, even Al Pacino is wanting to be in one, for crying out loud. I know. So, I mean, I think that's why it's so relevant to today and why I find it so fascinating, especially as a fan of both art and superhero movies.
Right.
I love those questions that it's raised there. I found it really compelling, especially when you add legacy to that and what it means for the Michael Keaton character. And on top of him wanting this legacy, he's obviously dealing with identity with this Birdman character kind of always haunting him. And at the core of this film, and I think this is what's really fascinating for me, is it definitely has all those stuff that we were talking about, but I saw this as a man struggling with insecurity.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
he's a guy that thinks he's a nobody. He has to earn his respect, and Birdman wasn't enough for that. Art isn't good enough for that. He just wants this respect. He wants this prestige. That's ultimately what he's seeking in this movie. And it's also why I love the quote-unquote supernatural elements of this film. I think it plays into his insecurity and his identity as Birdman that's always been haunting him.
Yeah.
And I think it culminates for me in a really great scene that we talked about when we reviewed this, the moment when he's in Times Square and he's kind of exposed, if you will. Yeah, I love how symbolically...
If you will.
Yeah, I love how symbolically that plays into his insecurity, because for people that really struggle with that, their biggest fear is being exposed, because when you're exposed, you're vulnerable. And when he's in Times Square, that's when he is literally and metaphorically exposed, and people are yelling out, "Birdman, Birdman!" Yet he's in the middle of doing this play about art because he's wanting to earn that respect.
But not even that; it's in the middle of the play. It's
of
the performance of the play.
It even adds to add even further into that. So,
Birdman,
yeah,
Birdman.
Exactly. So I love how all of that intertwines with this idea of his insecurity and what he's struggling with ultimately for me. And like you were saying, it's very funny. There's a lot of great dramatic moments, but it's also very funny in a lot of ways. I mean, just the scene where Keaton and Edward Norton are just fighting, and then the camera pans to those two guys just watching.
Actually, the one joke that makes me lose it every time is when he's doing the interview with those guys in the beginning of the movie and says, he said, absolutely not. Like, this is why I said no to Birdman 4. And then Korean guys like, oh, Birdman 4, you do Birdman 4.
That's what people want out of
Yeah,
him. So, I mean, that just adds on to that insecurity and struggle that he has. So, yeah, I found the exploration of all that just super fascinating. I loved it. So,
absolutely.
And the ending, I think, has resonated louder with me the more I sit on it. So,
same.
Yeah. Really, really good stuff. All right, Matt, what do you got at number 2?
Okay. Taking it back to another film that we've talked about quite a bit. Again, no fanfare needed. Talking about David Fincher's Gone Girl.
Nice.
It's kind of been hovering through my top 10 list, kind of securing spots in the top 5 here and there. But God, I just read the book a couple weeks ago, as I mentioned earlier, and it just totally reaffirmed my feelings for the film. It's just so impeccably created. It manages to be both a commentary on like the modern news cycle and like how social media plays into the justice system and like exactly what justice means nowadays in 2014, 15, I guess, as it were. And yet it also like incorporates these like really compelling like airport fiction elements, you know, where you really it's a page turner of a film, you know, you're literally on the edge of your seat waiting to see what's next, and yet he's making like these massive jabs at like, you know, at themes that are so much larger than what you would expect from a detective or some kind of mystery film. And I just think it's so impeccably crafted, so beautifully put together, and it's so unrelentingly dark. And that's just, you know, we can only get that from David Fincher. And I just absolutely love him as a filmmaker. I think it's some of the best work of the year. So, number 2, Gone Girl.
And I think it has a lot to say not only about the news media, but about, you know, the modern day view of marriage too. And just particularly from a couple that in many ways really shouldn't be together, but maybe they stay together because they feel like it's safe or convenient, or that's because it's easy to do. That's what they think other people think they should do as well. Yeah, exactly. You're right. Easy to do. And it has a lot, and it's kind of, you know, it's harrowing in that regard too, that this happens. I mean, it's a very over the top exploration of it. And I also told told you this. I think it's a very good job also kind of demonstrating David Fincher's style. It's almost like a greatest hits of his styles for me, because you've got like that bedroom scene, which I'll leave it at that. That really harkens back to the visceral sensibility of like Seven and movies like that. But it's also very mature in many ways, like Zodiac and The Social Network is. It has a lot of those harrowing but also mature styles and balances very well. And I'll just say this right now. Unfortunately, it's not going to be in my top 10. It just missed out. It will be in my top 15 though.
Same here.
But what a great movie that it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so but my number two is the one right after I saw it, I said, there's no way this is going to be not my number one film of the year. I would have bet money that this was going to be my number one film of the year, but I'm putting it at number 2 right now. And that is Whiplash. Regardless,
that is kind of surprising because I was there when I saw your instant reaction after seeing it.
Yeah,
and of course we were on the podcast together, so it is a little surprising to me.
I still stand by that this is still one of the best endings I've seen in many recent years of all time. I just wanted to stand up and applaud and just replay like a great jazz piece that it was. The movie moved like a great jazz piece. And just like you already talked about, Matt, I won't go too much into detail about the performances and what this has to say about, the nature of like teaching ideologies and how there's like a different argument for it, and it's very gray. It's not black and white, doesn't really say what way's right or wrong. But it's such a harrowing and tale about, basically really is essentially Full Metal Jacket at Juilliard University. It's really what it is. And but it's so great. And that ending is so explosive. And by the time Black
Full Metal Jazz Kit?
Booyah! Booyah! Get that patented.
Matt was sitting there thinking, like, how can I make this?
How can I do this?
Make this?
How can I do, and this is why he's on this show right now, because he can come up with crap like that and make it work. I don't even want to. I just leave it at that. I can't say it because this is easily one of the best films of the year. It's phenomenal, and J.K. Simmons will deservedly win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. At least I hope so. Even Miles Teller is fantastic in this movie. What a revelation that he's had. Even like doing a lot of his own drumming in this movie. He doesn't do all of it, from what I understand, but he is a self-taught drummer, so most of it is done by him. But he at least works it enough to make it look convincingly like it is him, and that is definitely a hard feat to do, especially as being a very self-taught drummer, as he mentioned. And he's fantastic in this movie. All the supporting characters are fantastic in this movie, and it's just such a great movie. I cannot wait to rewatch it over and over and over again. It's phenomenal. Absolutely.
Well, I guess to bounce off of that again, we'll make it 2 for 2 in our top 3, Brendan, because at number 2, I also have Whiplash. And one of the things you just mentioned that really stuck out to me that I had written down in my notes as well is no one's really talking about Miles Teller in this film because it's the J.K. Simmons show, and that's all deserving. Yeah. But Miles Teller is really good here too. I mean, I did find him pretty stellar, and I don't need to rehash a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about, but I guess I will say, or kind of add on that, when we're talking about J.K. Simmons and the kind of aggressive style that he has with his teaching, I think the thing that really stands out for me with that is, while his motivations may seem crazy and kind of over the top, he fully believes it. Like, finding the great musicians is gonna come at a cost, and it's gonna mean pushing them over their limits, and he fully 1,000% buys into that. And he doesn't care what kind of cost there is. There's gonna be consequences. He knows it, and it doesn't matter, because he feels like the best students will overcome that and become the great musicians of the world. And so I found that really fascinating. And while there's a lot of other stuff that we could talk about, or that I could go into, I mean, there's no sense to rehash it, but the last thing I want to say is, Nate kind of touched on this with his voicemail when he was talking about Whiplash, is no matter your approach to it, you could take different styles, you can come at it from different angles, but ultimately this is a film, I think, about not settling for good. Like, you can be good, but just don't settle for that. You can come at it in different angles. You don't have to be a J.K. Simmons necessarily, but don't settle for just okay. Try to achieve greatness and try to get there no matter what it takes. And sometimes that mean pushing yourself over, or maybe it means you have to have a J.K. Simmons in your life to push you there. Either way, don't settle for okay. I love that idea, and I think ultimately that's why I love this film and what it's about. So.
I completely agree. Yeah.
All right, fellas, here it is. Our number 1 movies of 2014. Matt Oakes, what do you have at number 1?
Okay. This is a movie that you've already talked about at length. I've talked about at length. We've all talked about at length. Cinematography in this movie, fan-effing-tastic. Direction in this movie, fan-effing-tastic. Acting in this movie, amazing. I'm talking of Birdman. I don't know what I can say that hasn't already been said. I think it just is the perfect crossroads between art and entertainment, and it just fired on all cylinders. I was in it to win it the whole time. Absolutely loved every second of it. Can't wait to see it again. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah,
Birdman is the best movie of the year.
So,
we've really run it into the ground.
Yeah, we have.
It's
amazing though.
It's so good. It's on our high on our list for exact reasons that we already talked about. Phenomenal film.
If you hate Birdman, you're gonna hate listening to the show right now.
Yeah, it'll be boring for you at least. Yeah, it's like get on with the good stuff.
Birdman, I think if you hate Birdman, you got to pull an end of Birdman. And
that's terrible. That's terrible. No, don't do that. Not in a literal sense.
Not literally, but regardless, figuratively.
I endorse it.
Yeah, I endorse it as well. All right, Brendan, what is your number one movie of 2014?
My number one, in my personal opinion, is not only the best coming-of-age tale of the entire year, but a beautiful tale about the nature of how we view problems on Earth and trying to hide from it. And it's so harrowing and beautiful. I think by the time this movie ended and the credits started rolling, I was practically sobbing. And I was like, I not only could I not wait to watch it again, but it just helped me realize how like it's such a great open-minded view of the problems in this world and like, kind of growing up and being torn between a life that you really don't want to live. I am talking about The Tale of the Princess Kaguya. This blew me absolutely
I told you were gonna love
away.
it.
I mean, I was sobbing in the theater. I had to sink in my seat so no one would look at me and I'd being so embarrassed. I mean, there's a flying sequence that happens. It's arguably maybe a dream or not. I mean, there's a lot of ambiguity there, and I could argue both ways. But I was sobbing during that whole scene. I was just, this is the most beautiful thing I've seen in years. I think this is one of Studio Ghibli's very best films. I think this is better than even most of the best from Hayao Miyazaki, who is probably one of my top 5 favorite directors of all time. And the knowledge of knowing that this might be Studio Ghibli's last film is so heartbreaking for me, because not only have they made some of the best animated movies in general, they've made some of the best movies in general. It's what an experience this was. Beautiful score, such interestingly like painting-like drawing of animation style that you kind of forget about even 5 minutes in, because it creates this real world of authenticity. And as I mentioned, tells this great tale about a young woman young girl rather, who's kind of torn between a life that she wants growing up as a child and the life that she doesn't want, that her parents or parents that take her in kind of want to force upon her. But it also creates this nice other story about the natures of horrors on this earth and how people trying to hide from it, being the people that she's originally from. But she wanted to leave to kind of learn about what the nature of Earth is. And I love that I love that. And the last final shot of this movie involving a moon, that's all I'll really say. I was in the time it just went black screen, I was just wow. I would go as far as to say, I think if I were to rank like all my favorite films of the last like 5 years, this could easily still be my number one. This is one of the best things that I've seen in many. I can't believe I'm saying this. I thought I would like it. I knew I would like it because I love Studio Ghibli, but this is one of the most beautiful things I've sat through. Yeah. Oh wow!
I'll say, as heartbreaking as you find it, that this could be the last movie from them. At the same time, if you're going to go out, that's a way to go out.
I'm glad they went out with an absolute bang.
Yeah, and I think I read that it took them like 10 years to make this film, because it's from what I can understand, it's big folklore for them. Yeah, and obviously a lot of it's hand-drawn paintings. That's going to take a lot of time anyway. But I think they took a long time to construct the story that they wanted to tell. It was amazing. I mean, really the only difference between How to Train Your Dragon 2 and that film for me is, and it's not fair because I was already emotionally invested in the How to Train Your Dragon series because of the first one. It had
the first movie,
I was more emotionally invested in that one, which is an unfair criticism.
That's like saying you like the Avengers because you knew all those characters beforehand.
Exactly. So while I wasn't as emotionally invested in this, I completely agree that it introduces all these complex dynamics that is fascinating, and I agree with you. By the end end of it, I was sobbing as well. And not only are you going to engage with the main character, but I think the parents themselves have some dynamics that's really interesting as well. And especially being a male, like looking at the father figure in that character, it was heartbreaking to me because he really loved his daughter and was trying to do the best things, but he didn't understand her.
Right.
And so he kept doing these things that she didn't want.
Yeah.
Which that whole sequence was incredible.
Indirectly thinking about stuff he also wanted himself too, and not being able to put that on the side. So there's a lot, even a nice side story about the nature of what proper parenthood is.
Exactly.
Too. A lot going on here. This is, in my opinion, I don't think it's getting enough credit. I think this deserves a win for Best Animated Feature of the Year. What a phenomenal experience I had. This is the reason why I love movies like this. This is absolutely incredible.
It's incredible. I would agree. So, all right, for my number one movie of the year, this is going to be a film that no one really has on their top 10 list, especially at number one. And that's okay with me because this is just my favorite film this year. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best of 2014, but it's my favorite, and it's one that's going to stick with me for a long time, which is ultimately why I ended up my number one spot, because for a long time I had Birdman at number one, then I had Whiplash at number one. Those two would go back and forth for a while, and then ultimately, ironically, after a conversation with my wife, who hates all these kinds of movies, this ended up sitting at my number one, and this is one I could have talked about as far as best under the radar or best surprise movies that we talked about earlier. For me, I wanted to wait till now.
Yeah.
Because this is the most important film I've seen all year. It's very thematically rich and one I loved. And I'm talking about Tom Hardy and Locke from earlier this year.
Oh, good choice.
Hello?
Eddie, it's your dad. Is your mother there?
No, she's not back from the shops yet. She's getting that German beer that you like for the match.
Okay, listen, I won't be back for that.
What?
Something's come up. I can't get out of it.
I'm wearing the shirt. Mum's getting sausages. Oh, yeah, and guess what? She's wearing the shirt as well. Oh, Dad, it's so embarrassing. Yeah, what did you say about coming home?
I won't be back for the match. I'll have to listen to it on the radio.
Dad, you said you'd be back. It's rubbish on the radio. Mum's doing sausages and all.
Is your brother there?
Yeah, do you want a word?
No, just tell your mother to call me when she gets back. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I love you.
What?
It's okay. You know what? Just get her to call me when she gets back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, all right. Bye, Dad.
And I love Tom Hardy for all the reasons we talked about before. And what I love about this movie is that a lot of times in film, we see bad guys doing bad things, and that's very entertaining. I mean, we can think about Wolf of Wall Street and a lot of films like that.
Sure.
At the heart of this movie, it's about an average guy who loves his family, who's very dedicated to his work, but he made a mistake, as we all do. It's a pretty bad mistake, but he made one. But the difference between Ivan Locke and most people in the world is that he is willing to own it. And he owns it in a way that I think if people would take the same ideas and incorporate it into their own life, I think it would solve a lot of problems in this world. But unfortunately, that's not the case. But this is a guy who he knew the cost. He knew that there was going to be a lot of consequences, and it didn't matter to him. And I think throughout the film, I found that super compelling. I was engaged with the family stuff. I thought all of that was palpable. I could understand that situation, and you can understand Ivan Locke and him wanting to do the right thing, and you can understand his family's reaction all at the same time.
Right.
And at the same time, he's also dedicated to his work. He's got this big thing coming up, and it would have been so easy for him to abandon his job at that point, but he doesn't, because he knew that there was this big project coming up. And so he puts his hands in all these different areas as he could, because he is a good guy who is trying to do the right thing, but at the same time, he's having to drive to another place, so he can't be with his family. He can't be with his job, unfortunately. But he tries to handle those situations in a way that I found affable. I was absolutely captivated. As simple as a movie as this is, I just found the drama fascinating. I was glued to the screen the entire time. So for me, on top of great cinematography, a fun score, all that sort of jazz, Locke just has compelling themes that I think is incredibly important, that unfortunately a lot of people have looked past, I think. But I think if people took it to heart, it would change a lot in our world, in my opinion. So, and I just found this to be a movie that I'm going to remember when I think about 2014. So
it is an important film in that regard. I wasn't hugely high on it. I guess, I mean, I do like the movie. I would recommend it. Don't get me wrong. I guess maybe more for like, I don't think there's, maybe I'm judging it on a personal level that there's not a whole lot of rewatchability for me or something like that. But it is regardless a very important movie that I think most men at least have to see, especially if you've done a lot of wrong. It has a good lesson for you that you've got. It's about swallowing your pride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a lot easier said than done, I think.
I agree.
I mean, I think it's easy to put ourselves in that situation and go, of course I would do the right thing.
Oh, yeah. But
would you?
Would you really?
It would have been so easy for him to just go back, to just be like, I'm not going to deal with it. Like, it's an hour and a half away. I don't have to worry about it.
Right.
Nothing's going to change from my end if I don't do anything. But he wasn't going to be that kind of person. And I find that extremely affable. So
I agree.
Very good stuff. All right, real fast before we get out of here, any honorable mentions, Matt, that you want to toss out there?
Any? Nope. That's
I know you're doing a top 100. I have a top 30. I know Brendan's got a 20. What all do you want to toss out there as honorable mentions?
Okay. Let's see. I'll throw out Cold in July, Cheap Thrills, Theory of Everything, Wetlands, Most Violent Year, Long Distance, Starry Eyes, Ernest and Celestine, The Drop, Sequoia, It Follows, The Rover, Kumiko the Treasure Hunter, Nymphomaniac Volume 1, Blue Ruin, Skeleton Twins, Foxcatcher, How to Train Your Dragon 2, just for you guys, Guardians of the Galaxy, The One I Love, Edge of Tomorrow, Snowpiercer, Venus in Furs, Grand Budapest, Frank, To Kill a Man, Jodorowsky's Dune, In Order of Disappearance, Chef, The Infinite Man, The Heart Machine, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, Wild, Borgman, Calvary, The Trip to Italy, The Box Trolls, Noah, Nymphomaniac Volume 2, Happy Christmas, Young Ones. Should I keep going? I think I'm good. I think
that's good. All right, Brendan, finish out your top 20.
All right, I'll go from 11 through to 20. So as I mentioned, 11 was Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, just missed it. Continuing on, number 12, Under the Skin. Number 13, The Wind Rises. Number 14, Guardians of the Galaxy. Number 15, Gone Girl. Number 16, Inherent Vice. 17, Force Majeure, great foreign language film. Number 18, Captain America, The Winter Soldier, great Marvel film. I think the two best Marvel films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe came out this year.
Yeah.
Number 19, Enemy. You had it on your list, Matt. Great movie. And finally out at number 20, a bit low for most people, but I have Boyhood. And mainly, I mean, we had a lot of, JD, we talked about some of our minor problems with it, but it's still regardless a phenomenal film. And that being said, the 11 through 20 here are all phenomenal films. At the very least, I would have given these films an A on our show. I mean, they're absolutely worth seeing. They're phenomenal movies. And what a year this has been. So and that's rounding out my top 20 right now, at least how it is now.
Yeah, I'll just go through these real fast. Like I said, my 11 through 20, I feel like could be its own top 10. But in order from 11 through 20, I have Boyhood, Selma, Nightcrawler, Gone Girl, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Force Majeure, Captain America, The Winter Soldier, the Lego Movie, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Snowpiercer. Rounds out my 21 through 30 real fast. I have The Babadook, The Wind Rises, The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, As It Is in Heaven, Wild, Only Lovers Left Alive, Enemy, Blue Ruin, Mistaken for Strangers, and 30 is Starred Up for me. So that would be my top 30. Man, great list, guys. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, man.
Man, oh, man.
My throat is sore.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, I'm so relieved because it was so stressful coming up with this top 30 list. So.
I know.
Good
the
stuff,
end
though.
is here.
Yeah.
And now we're back.
I know. All right, before we get out of here, Matt, real fast, tell us one more time where people can find you at Silver Screen Riot.
Well, I think you just told them. Yeah, I'm at Silver Screen Riot. That's .com. Not to be confused with .edu. You know, so most people assume.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's an educational site.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is educational. Come school yourself. I'm headed to Sundance in like a week, a little more than a week. So I will have the scoop on all the best movies way before anyone else. Just like last year. So maybe I'll do a layup with you afterwards, give you the lowdown. But your number one movie of the year, I saw at Sundance last year.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true, very true.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, definitely go check out Matt's stuff. Phenomenal stuff. Thanks, Matt, for joining us. And that should do it for this week's show. Real quick, as a reminder, you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/InSessionFilm. You can follow us on Twitter at InSession Film and on Google Plus and YouTube as well. Just search InSession Film and sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can do that on Facebook by clicking the newsletter tab or on our site at InSessionFilm.com/newsletter.
And for more thoughts on the films that we watch, you can check us out on Letterboxd, where you can check us out at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm. We got a lot of reviews up there as well. We also try to respond to every piece of email that we get, so you can email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Also, you could subscribe to us on iTunes and on Stitcher. While you're on iTunes, you can leave us a review and comment there. We'd appreciate some feedback there as well. Also, you can check us out at our Listen Now page on our website at InSessionFilm.com/listen-now.
And the InSession Film Podcast is supported by our super awesome listeners like you. If you want to help support us, you can just go click on our fun bonus content, which we have some new segments up there that I know you'll love. And once you click on our bonus content tab, there you can download them for just a small donation of 99 cents. You can also check out the InSession Film store or just go to InSessionFilm.com/donate and you'll see a bunch of information there on how you can help us. You can also hear everything we do on our mobile app for just a one-time fee of $1.99. You can find the app on the Amazon Market for Android devices, the Windows 8 phone store for Windows devices, and the Podcast Box app for iOS devices. All those details are on the site at InSessionFilm.com/apps. All right, before we get out of here, though, Matt, any final thoughts on anything before we leave?
Let's just hope that 2015 is as good as 2014. And from the looks of it, it could be even better. So
I know. I hope so.
If that happens, movie going is going to be an event, like a sporting event.
Yeah.
If only. I hope people can get back into it. And we can, the box office can make a little more money than it did this year because
it was
important. It's an important institution going to the
and
movies.
it was just poorly marketed this year. I think more than anything
Support
else.
cinema.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the marketing was just terrible this year. I mean, because there were a lot of great movies, even some great summer movies. I think that was very consistent and rivaled some of the best ones in the past.
Yeah.
Just wasn't very well marketed.
Yeah. Brennan, any final thoughts for you outside of that?
I got to drive home.
Yes, you do. Yes,
but
you
I'm
do.
hungry.
Yeah. Oh, man. This was a long show, but it was a lot of fun. It was really great. As far as final thoughts for me, I'll just echo, I love this year. Hopefully the box office is better in 2015, but I absolutely love 2014. It was a phenomenal year for me in general, so I'm glad that movies was just as good. Stay tuned for this week's extra film. As I mentioned, Brendan and I, we're going to be talking about Inherent Vice and Selma, two films that will round out our 2014 film discussion. So that should be a lot of fun. Next week on the show, episode 100, we're going to have some fun special guests here in studio with us that I cannot wait to reveal, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks, Matt, for joining us once again. Really appreciate you being on the show, man.
Yeah, guys, a lot of fun. Take care of yourselves.
Absolutely.
You too, man. Get over that jet lag.
Out. Yeah, I think this helped. Nothing like a 3.5 hour podcast.
Yeah,
really drag you out of the mire.
Exactly. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you guys next time on the InSession Film Podcast. And he picked Guardians of the Galaxy.
What an idiot.
We'll have some good outtakes.
I'm just going to say that about every single pick.
Yeah.
What an idiot.
Okay, here we go.
Just be like, red dumbass.
Yeah. And he doesn't give me number one because his top 10 show is next week. So he didn't give me anything. But he did say Nymphomaniac was his best surprise movie of the year.
What a jerk.
It's not even an idiot. What an asshole. Refusing to play the game.
Gosh. This could be a long string of great outtakes at the end of this. Maybe I'll just make that into bonus content.
I think you have to. I think you have to. This is lovely.
Good stuff. For the entire version of our podcast, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes or on Stitcher, or check us out online at InSessionFilm.com.